Hello and welcome back. This is it. We've reached the final book in the Bushy Tales series, Tales End. And today we'll start with the prologue. Perched high on the branches of an old pine tree in the woods is a dray. This dray has been the home for generations of one squirrel family, each generation handing it down to the next. Inside the dray, a mother squirrel is settling her children down for the night. She has triplets, a son and 2 daughters. Every night she settles them down with a story. She has lots of stories to tell. She gets them into their beds, making sure that their tails are tucked away. "Now then," she says to her sleepy children, "where were we?" "The rainbow," one of the little girls says. "The rainbow," her sister echoes. "Oh yes," White Tip replies, although she knew it was the rainbow all along. The rainbow we thought would bring us home. Chapter 1, in which we catch up with old friends. On the day this story begins, Squish the red squirrel was up early to find some breakfast for himself and for White Tip. It was funny, he thought as he gathered some juicy looking acorns, how he had always thought of White Tip as his friend. But they'd been through such adventures and come such a long way that she was so much more than a friend now. She was his partner, and he could not imagine life without her. He knew that when they got home to their woods, he would ask her if maybe she would think about one day settling into a dray of their own. If they made it back to their woods. It was still a very long journey to make yet, and they still had no idea which way to go. Squish gathered up the acorns and hopped back to where White Tip and their badger friends Brian and Nell were sleeping. Squish sat on a tree stump on the riverbank and nibbled on an acorn. He never could resist trying the first one, and watched the friends sleep. They'd been through so much together. First they'd survived the collapse of a badger tunnel, then travelled underground to new woods they'd never seen before. Then they'd walked for days trying to find their way home until they met Barrington, not Barrington the Mad, they all knew that now, and his colony of badgers. Together they had sent a group of people, hunters, and their angry snarling dogs on their way. Brian had learned how to see in colour. Now they just had the simple task of going home. At least, it should be simple. There was only one problem: they had absolutely no idea if they were going in the right direction. Following the river had been Nell's idea. If it was true that rivers all flowed in the same direction, and if this one was the same river that had flowed near their woods, then all they had to do was follow it and it would take them home. But that was a lot of ifs. They'd been following it for a long time and seemed to be getting no nearer. Squish had begun to wonder if they were just getting further away. Last night's rainbow had given them hope. They all thought it was pointing them to home, but the rainbow was gone now and they still had no real idea of where they were. Squish was so deep in his thoughts that he hadn't noticed that White Tip had woken up and joined him. "You're up early," she said, making Squish turn with a start. "Breakfast," he replied, holding out an acorn. "Which way then?" White Tip asked, taking the acorn. "Do we carry on following the river, or do we think of something else?" "I don't know," Squish replied. "Follow the river, I suppose. It's the only plan we have." "We'll get home," White Tip said with a smile. "Do you think so? Because when we do, I wondered if maybe..." "Maybe what?" "Maybe, just maybe, I mean, say if you don't want to, but I just thought maybe..." "Squish," White Tip exclaimed exasperatedly, "it's not like you to be lost for words." Squish took a deep breath. "I just wondered if you thought maybe we should build a dray of our own when we get back." There was a pause while White Tip nibbled at her acorn. "I know," Squish said eventually. "Silly idea." "No, it isn't," White Tip replied, putting her acorn down and taking Squish's paw in hers. "Of course, that's what we're going to do. I've known it since I first met you." At the same time, a new day was breaking in the woods, but for Colin the Fox, the woods were simply not the same anymore. He used to meet up with his friends Squish and White Tip and grumpy old Brian, but they'd all gone. It was only a little over a week since he heard the horrible news that the badger tunnel had collapsed with the squirrels, Brian and his friend Nell on the other side. Brian's father Earthface had been inconsolable. He had wanted to start digging straight away and had to be dragged away by the other badgers. It was too unstable, they said. Another collapse and badgers could be hurt or killed. They just had to hope that Brian and his friends were safe on the other side and trying to find their way back. But the days dragged on. Earthface kept pacing around the area where the tunnel had caved in, trying to find a safe way in. And as the days passed, there was no sign of Colin's friends. Colin's mother Viv had noticed her son's loneliness and sadness growing day by day. "They'll come back," she said. "Look what happened when you went to the town. You came back, didn't you?" "A tunnel didn't collapse on me," Colin replied. "And we don't know that one collapsed on Squish and the others. They might have found another way out. Badger tunnels can lead anywhere." "I know," Colin replied. "Mum, I think I should go and look for them." "Well, of course you do," Viv said. "Even though you don't eat meat, a fox's instinct are to hunt and to track. Follow your instincts, Colin. Go and find your friends and bring them home." Chapter 2, in which the journey home begins. Brian the badger woke up from a wonderful dream in which he walked through the woods with his friend Nell by his side. He was describing to her the colours of everything he saw, and the descriptions he gave were brilliant. When he woke up, he couldn't remember half the words he'd used in his dream. When he woke, Nell was still by his side, fast asleep, but they were not in the woods. Instead, they were in a hollow he had hastily dug in a rather damp riverbank. The rainbow he had seen and enjoyed so much the previous day had faded, and a grey mist hung over the river like a cobweb. Squish and Whitetip were sitting together on a tree stump near the river, deep in conversation. Brian shook soil and grass from his fur and shuffled over to see them. "We were just talking about which way to go," Squish said, as Brian joined them. "Among other things," Whitetip added, with what Brian could swear was a giggle. "What do you think?" Squish asked Brian, ignoring Whitetip. "Keep following the river or try something else?" Brian thought for a moment. He was torn between wanting to stay loyal to Nell, following the river had been her idea, and his own instincts, which were that they were going the wrong way and getting further away from the woods, not nearer. "Let's stick to the river for a bit, maybe just today," he decided. "If it doesn't seem to be getting us anywhere, we can try and think of something else." So that was settled then. As soon as Nell woke up and the badgers had eaten some breakfast, the little group of animals set off once again. Brian and Nell walked along the riverbank while Squish and Whitetip took it in turns to run up trees and see what they could see up ahead. They hadn't been walking long when Brian heard a sudden splash from the river. At first, he couldn't see anything. But then there was another splash, and the head of an otter, covered in slick, wet fur, appeared out of the water. A pair of shiny black eyes peered at Brian, and a look of uncertainty and fear. "Don't be afraid," Brian said. "Are you after my fish?" the otter asked. "Don't worry," Brian replied, "we don't eat fish." "Because these are my fish," the otter said, as if waiting to be challenged. "We don't want your fish," Nell said, joining Brian at the water's edge. "We just want to find our way home. Please, Mr. Otter, can you help us?" The otter looked doubtful. He glanced this way and that, as if looking for threats coming from all directions. "Where's your home, then?" the otter asked. "We live in the woods," Squish said, hopping down off a branch. "Do you know them?" "Hang on," the otter said. "Badgers and squirrels working together? I've not seen that one before. Is this a new thing? Because if this is a trick to trick me out of my fish..." "Don't be silly," Whitetip joined in. "Squirrels certainly don't eat fish. How would we catch them?" "Well, if you can work with badgers, who knows what you can do," the otter said. "Maybe you can swim." "Honestly," Squish said, "we don't want your fish. How many more times? We just want to find the woods." "I don't know much about woods," the otter said. "I know about rivers and such like, but you don't get much fish in woods." "Do you know where this river leads?" Brian asked. "Where it leads?" the otter asked. "Where it leads? Well, of course, everybody knows that." "Well, we don't," Whitetip said. "No, I don't suppose you do, what with you being a squirrel and everything." "This river," the otter said, as if imparting the wisdom of the ages, "this river leads to the other river." Brian and his friends looked at each other. "Is the other river far?" asked the otter. "About a day's swim," the otter said, "but I wouldn't bother if I were you. It isn't a very good river. The fish are rubbish." "But we're not after..." Nell started to protest. "Oh, never mind. I think we'll go and have a look anyway. Thank you, Mr. Otter." As they walked away, Brian could hear the otter splashing about in the river behind him. "Badgers and squirrels," he was saying. "What are the next? Foxes and rabbits, hedgehogs and shrews." "He was quite a strange otter," Nell remarked as they walked. "Yes, but I think he might have accidentally told us the way home," Brian told her. "I think the other river might be our river." So on they walked with renewed energy and hope in their hearts, but they were finally on their way back home. Little did they suspect that the dangers that lay ahead would be far more frightening than anything they had faced so far. We'll come back tomorrow for part to find out what these dangers are. Thank you.